Thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Liat, and I'm going to take you through polymer clay color mixing and how to mix and curate your own color recipes using polymer clay. So first, a brief introduction. I am the proud owner behind Dewdrop Inc., a small business that I started really by accident at the start of the 2020 pandemic. I was at home, I got laid off from my job, and I started to create with polymer clay. And then before I knew it, I started selling jewelry. I saw that there was a big gap in the market for people that wanted a lot of information about how to create their own jewelry, and it wasn't available. So I created a DIY earring kit. And then I started to branch into other learning resources for other makers who I empowered to help create. I also sell educational resources online like beginner guides, color recipes, and tutorials. And I'm also the published author of Making Polymer Clay Earrings, which you can find on Amazon and everywhere where books are sold. So today I'm going to take you through what polymer clay actually is. We're going to talk about the different brands of clay that are best suited towards earring making, the benefits of color mixing, basic color theory, creating custom colors, and then how you're going to store and organize all of your color recipes. So what is polymer clay? Polymer clay was first formulated in the late 1930s, so it's been around for a long time. The first brand was Fimo, which still exists today, and it was made in Germany. It was originally intended for doll creation. The name polymer comes from the plasticizers that are used in the clay, polymer meaning plastic, and then clay denotes its ability to harden once it's baked. So the compound itself is actually made of plasticizers, lubricants, and pigments. Polymer clay is like painting in three-dimensional form. Just like you would mix a palette of paints to create a rainbow, you can do the same with clay, except the result is sculptural. Now let's get into the different brands of clay because there's some we love and there's some that we don't. So, not all polymer clay is created equal. Only premium brands of clay are actually durable enough to withstand the wear and tear that earrings would go through. We love polymer clay for earrings because it's lightweight, it's colorful, it's bold, it's easy to create with. You can make things that are easy and comfortable to wear. However, certain brands like Sculpey 3 or anything that you would buy off of Amazon would not withstand the wear and tear of earrings. If you bake them and you drop them or bend them, then they'll actually snap and break. So the types of clay that you would want to use within the Sculpey line are Sculpey Primo and Sculpey Soufflé, and then within the Fimo line, Fimo Soft and Fimo Professional. Cernit and Kato are also great brands to use for polymer clay earring creation. Now, when it comes to color recipes, and this isn't something I have on the slide here, but it's such an important note. The different brands of clay have different types of pigments. So if you're following a color recipe that is specifically made with Sculpey Soufflé colors, you cannot substitute a Fimo brand and expect to get the same results. So it's important to know that these clays are not created equal in terms of how you work with them. They're also not created equal in terms of the types of pigments that are in the clay. A Fimo soft red is going to be very different than a Sculpey red. So just keep that in mind. Let's talk about the benefits of color mixing. So why color mix in the first place? Well, first of all, you can really limit your inventory and pare everything down to just 5 clay colors. If you use a red, a yellow, a blue, so the primary colors, and then a black and a white, which are shades, you can make an entire palette of colors. In fact, what you're seeing here on the left-hand side, all those beautiful colors, were only made with 5 ingredients. You can also avoid using colors that might be discontinued. So if you use a specific, Sculpey green that you love and you use it for your earrings and then it gets discontinued, you're going to have a tough time trying to match that. So you can avoid all of this by creating your own colors in the first place. Color mixing and writing down your recipes really takes the guesswork out of color creation and matching, so it saves you a lot of time. This also cuts down on a lot of waste because you're not trying to constantly guess and add little bits and pieces of clay to get that color that you want. Color mixing also allows you to create unique collections with colors that are not found on shelves. And lastly, when you're curating a collection, a jewelry collection, having a cohesive and a consistent result will come from using specific color recipes and colors that you've created that you can integrate throughout all of your pieces. Now, jumping into color theory, we're not going to go through color theory in detail today, but there are some terms that are really helpful to understand. So this might seem like basic information, but if you add black to any color, you're going to make a darker shade. If you add white to any color, you're going to create a lighter tint. And if you add both, in other words, black and white make gray, you're going to create what's called a tone, which is more of a neutral color. You can make the entire rainbow from the 3 primary colors, red, yellow, and blue. Secondary colors are made by mixing the primary colors together. So that's orange, green, and purple. And then tertiary colors are derived from mixing primary and secondary colors together. Now, a lot of people like to have muted colors in their collection. And I already mentioned that mixing in gray can do this. But you can also do this by mixing in brown, which is made from yellow, red, and blue. However, one of the best ways I find to mute colors is by looking at the complementary color. And I'll give you an example. If you've created a lilac color, which would be considered a purple, look at the opposite side of the color wheel and you have yellow. If you want to make that purple into more of a mauve, more of a muted color, rather than trying to add a brown, which you then have to create, all you simply have to do is add a little dash of yellow and that purple will soon be muted. You can do the same thing with a red by adding a little bit of green, and the same thing with a blue by adding a little bit of orange. Now we can talk about how to actually create your custom colors. Well, there's 3 methods to do this. There's the block method, which uses the indents on the clay as the parts. And then there's also the weighted method, which uses a scale to weigh all your parts. Now, I don't recommend using either of these methods because honestly, they're not the most accurate. And I find that the block method, you end up with too much clay, and the weighted method is not that easy to execute, and it's not accurate because people's scales are very different. So we're really going to focus on the cutter method, which is where you roll sheets of clay into equal thickness and cut out parts to create your color recipe. First, what you're going to want to do is condition your clay. Conditioning just helps make the clay more pliable. You can do this by hand, or you can do this by machine. Next, you're going to want to roll the clay. Now, this is really important because your clay has to be the same thickness for all of your parts. All of your parts need to be exactly the same thickness. And if you're rolling by hand, you want to use depth guides. You can use craft sticks as depth guides, which is fine. You just want to make sure that at the end of the day, the sheet of clay that you're cutting things from is going to be the same thickness. Using a pasta machine will give you the same result. Then you're going to want to use a cutter to cut all of the parts out. Now, as long as you use the same cutter, it doesn't matter what shape it is or how big it is, as long as you use the same cutter for all of your parts, your color recipe is going to be accurate. You're going to cut out the parts from your primary colors, you're going to note what they are, and then that's how you're going to record your color recipe. And you can see here on the right-hand side examples of different shades of green here that were created using my color recipes. So for example, the time one at the very top simply uses 10 parts yellow, 1 part blue, and 2 parts black. On the next slide, I'm going to play a quick video showing you from start to finish how this is done. So I hope that gives you a good overview of how you actually, from start to finish, create your color recipes. Now, some tips and tricks for this. Now, you probably have seen cutters out there that look like a circle, like a little pie with different parts cut out of them, and they're specifically made for color mixing. You can feel free to purchase those, but personally, I just use a small cutter at home. And the reason I like to use a small cutter is that some of my recipe requires 30 parts of white, especially for lighter colors. And so I find that it's a lot easier for me to just use um, a small cutter so I don't end up with too much waste. You want to always roll your clay onto a clean surface, but specifically tile or glass, because it helps with removing the excess clay from around the parts. If you want to keep clay from sticking to your cutter, since you're going to be using it quite a bit, just submerge it in cold water or have a bowl of cornstarch that you can dip the cutter in as well, and that will help with cutting out all of the parts. If you're mixing by hand, which I don't suggest you do, but bless you if you're going to take that initiative, it's going to be hard on your hands. You just want to make sure you're washing your hands between color changes because cross contamination happens very easily, especially if you're mixing a red clay and then you're using white, and then it will actually change the accuracy of your color recipe. You also want to bake all your pieces when you're done. You want to, once you have your color recipe, you want to actually create a tile by cutting out a part out of the color recipe, the finished color recipe, just using a cutter and baking it off to see if the color changes. So you can compare the finished color to the raw color and see if there was any differences in your oven, because often there are. And if you ever run out of a color, uh, but you want to bulk up your clay, so for example, you've mixed a nice green shade and you want to make more, but you've run out of, the yellow that's used in the green, you can add a little bit of translucent clay. What it does is it just bulks up your batch, but it doesn't have much of an impact on the color. So now that you've created your color recipes and you've written them all down, you want to make sure that you're storing them and organizing them appropriately. So the best way I like to do this is actually by using snap containers from the dollar store. This allows you to see everything, and I actually like to create tiles. So you can see on the bottom there, I've actually cut out tiles for my color recipes. And then I use a Velcro sticker to stick them on the top of the compartments. So I can then pull those tiles later and play around with them and make different color combinations that I can use to curate my jewelry collections. I also like to write my color recipes on little sticky notes and stick them inside the compartments. I've heard some makers file their color recipes in coin slot holders that you can get. They're just plastic coin slot holders that actually go into a binder or a duotang, so you can choose to do it that way. I personally like to keep everything, all my excess clay in these containers and have my tiles right on top. One thing I will say is that make sure you're always avoiding any polycarbonate or polystyrene products. They're marked with a number 6 or a 7. They will melt when they come in contact with polymer clay. So just avoid those types of plastics, but generally the snap containers that you can get from the dollar store or the Dollar Tree work really, really well for storing your clay. And that's all the time I have today. Thank you so much for following along with this tutorial. Just a quick note that Dewdrop Inc. does donate a portion of all the proceeds to Pancreatic Cancer Canada. I do this in honor of my late mother, Tally, who was the inspiration behind my small business and taught me everything about polymer clay. There's a cute little picture there of me and my son during the pandemic. I actually had a baby and named him after my mother as well. So the legacy gets continued on in everything that we do. And I love having my son sort of be a little part of the business. And if you in future want to purchase anything from my website on Etsy or dewdropinc.ca, you can use a 15% off promo code, You're the Best. And that applies to jewelry, kits, and all of the educational resources, including my very own color recipes as well as beginner guides. So thank you so much, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the seminars.